The last breath. The battle was fierce, and the sound of explosions filled the air. The sky was a deep, fiery red, as alien ships swarmed the battlefield. The human fleet fought back, but they were losing. The enemy was overwhelming, and their ships seemed unstoppable. In the middle of the chaos stood a soldier, a young man who had been fighting with all his might. His name was Marcus. He had always dreamed of being a hero, but today, that dream was fading quickly. His ship was damaged, sparks flying from the control panels, and his body felt heavy. He could barely hold on to the controls as the ship spiraled toward the ground. The last thing Marcus remembered was the explosion. It was deafening. A bright flash of light and then nothing. His body was thrown around like a ragdoll. He couldn't breathe. His chest felt tight, and his head spun as if the world was collapsing around him. The pain was unbearable, and he could feel his vision going black. I'm done for, he thought, his mind slipping away as his vision blurred completely. He felt his heart slow down, the darkness closing in on him. There was no more fight left in him. No more will to survive. His final breath left his body, and he thought it was the end. But then, something strange happened. Marcus awoke in a place that felt completely different from the battlefield. It wasn't dark anymore, and the pain was gone. His body didn't ache, and his chest no longer felt heavy. It was as if he had been pulled from the edge of death itself. But where was he? The air felt cool and unfamiliar, and he was lying on something soft, something he couldn't place. He blinked his eyes several times, trying to focus. The world around him was blurry, and the sounds were muffled. It took him a few moments to realize he wasn't alone. Someone was there. He turned his head slowly, his eyes locking onto a figure in the dim light. At first, he thought he was seeing things, hallucinating, but the figure was too real to ignore. It was a woman. But not like any woman he had ever seen before. She had strange, glowing skin that seemed to shimmer in the soft light. Her hair flowed like liquid silver, and her eyes were filled with something he couldn't understand. Sadness. Tears rolled down her cheeks, and her lips trembled as she whispered something he couldn't make out. She was kneeling beside him, her hands trembling as they reached out to touch his arm. Marcus tried to speak, but his voice was weak. Who are you?" he whispered. The woman's eyes widened, and she quickly leaned closer, her face filled with worry. "You're awake," she said softly. "You shouldn't be alive. You should have." Her words trailed off, and Marcus felt his heart race. What was she talking about? Was this a dream? Was he dead? It didn't make sense. 1 minute, he was dying in the middle of a battle, and now, he was alive, in the care of this strange, glowing woman. He tried to sit up, but his body was weak. His muscles were stiff, and his head spun as he moved. The woman placed her hand gently on his chest, pushing him back down. "Rest," she said, her voice comforting but filled with an undeniable sadness. "You are safe now. For now." Safe. Marcus looked around, trying to make sense of his surroundings. He was no longer on a battlefield. No longer surrounded by the chaos of war. But where was he? And why was this alien woman crying for him? He felt something in his chest, an ache, not from the battle, but from the strange, unknown emotion he felt. It wasn't fear. It wasn't pain. It was something different. Something that made him feel important. You saved me?" he asked slowly, unsure of the words. The woman nodded, wiping away a tear. "I did," she replied quietly. "You were the last one left. The last soldier from your people. I couldn't let you die." Marcus was confused. His mind struggled to process her words. Why would you save me?" he asked, his voice still shaky. "I'm just a soldier. We're enemies. You shouldn't care." She looked at him with a deep sadness that made his heart ache. Because you showed mercy in a war that has seen nothing but destruction, she said. You were the one who fought with honor. You deserve better. Marcus lay back on the soft surface, trying to make sense of everything. Was this some sort of dream? Or had he really been saved by this alien queen? Her tears were real. Her sadness was real. But why? Why was she crying for him, a simple human soldier? Before he could ask any more questions, his eyes started to close. His body still felt weak, but something about her presence made him feel safe. He could hear her soft voice, whispering to him, but the words became unclear as his mind drifted again. Rest, human, she whispered. Rest. And for the first time in a long while, Marcus felt the weight of the war and the pain of battle lift off his shoulders. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't alone anymore. The alien queen's sorrow. Marcus woke again, but this time, the world around him was clearer. His body still felt weak, but his mind was sharper. The alien woman, the queen, was still beside him, watching over him like a guardian. She had not left his side, and her presence was both comforting and unsettling. As he tried to sit up again, she gently placed her hand on his shoulder, stopping him. No, you must rest, she said softly. Her voice was soothing, yet there was an undercurrent of something more, something deep and sorrowful. I need to understand, Marcus whispered, his voice barely above a breath. Why did you save me? You said I was the last one left, but why would you care about me? I'm just a soldier. The queen's gaze softened, and she slowly sat beside him. Her shimmering skin seemed to glow even more in the dim light of the room, but it was her eyes that captivated him. Those eyes, filled with endless sadness, seemed to hold the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. I care because, you are the last piece of hope for both our people, she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. I am not just a queen. I am a ruler of a broken empire, one that has been torn apart by war and betrayal. And you, human, are more than just a soldier. You are a symbol of something we both need. Marcus frowned, trying to process her words. A symbol? What do you mean? The queen's fingers trembled as she brushed a strand of silver hair from her face. My people, we have been at war for centuries, but it is not just war that has destroyed us. It is the loss of our way, our hope. When I saw you, fighting until the very end, refusing to give up even when the odds were against you, I realized something, she said, her voice soft yet filled with urgency. You represent the one thing we've lost, the will to fight for something more, something better. Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. He had never thought of himself as anything special. To him, he was just another soldier, one of many who fought and died for a cause that seemed impossible to win. But now, here he was, in the care of an alien queen, who saw something in him he hadn't even seen in himself. I'm just one man, he replied quietly. What can I possibly do for your people? The queen looked at him, her eyes intense yet filled with an odd sense of hope. You may be just one man, but sometimes, one act of bravery can change everything. You've already shown me that, she said softly. Your people fought valiantly, but your strength, your courage, it's something we desperately need. You are the last of your kind to show mercy in a war that has shown none. Marcus didn't know what to say. Her words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. It felt as though the fate of two civilizations rested on his shoulders, yet he was only one soldier, one human. He wasn't ready for this, not by any measure. But the queen's sincerity was undeniable. He could see it in the way she looked at him, in the quiet determination behind her words. Tell me what happened, Marcus asked, his voice filled with curiosity. Why is your empire in ruins? Who did this to you? The queen hesitated for a moment before speaking again. We were betrayed, she said, her voice trembling slightly. The galaxy was once united under the banner of peace, but there are always those who want more power, more control. My people, my empire, were torn apart by those who wanted to rule with an iron fist, who thought only of their own ambitions. She paused, her eyes clouding with grief. And now, we fight for survival. We fight because if we don't, we will be erased from history. Marcus could feel her pain in his bones. He knew what it was like to watch everything you loved slip away, to fight for something that seemed impossible to save. But there was something about her, something in her eyes that made him want to believe that this wasn't the end. She hadn't given up, and maybe, just maybe, neither should he. "I've seen what war does to people," he said, his voice low but steady. "I've seen my people die, and I've had to leave them behind. But I've also seen the strength it gives us. If we can stand together, we can find a way to win, even if it seems impossible." The Queen's gaze softened as she nodded, her tears now drying on her cheeks. "Perhaps you're right. Perhaps together, we can change the course of history." There was a moment of silence between them, but it wasn't an uncomfortable one. It was the kind of silence that came when two people, from different worlds, understood something important about each other. Finally, Marcus spoke again, a spark of hope in his voice. "Then let's fight together. Let's give your people that strength you're looking for." The Queen stood up, her silver hair flowing behind her like a stream of light. She held her hand out to him, and for the first time since waking up, Marcus felt a strange connection, a bond between them, something beyond just survival. "Together," she said, her voice filled with newfound resolve. "We can rebuild." Marcus reached out, gripping her hand, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't alone in this war after all. The strange connection. Marcus had never been one for feelings. He was a soldier, trained to fight, to survive, and to follow orders. But as he sat there beside the alien queen, looking out over the vast, shimmering cityscape of her world, something inside him began to shift. For the first time, he wasn't just fighting to survive. He was fighting for something bigger, something that reached beyond the borders of the battlefield. And it all started with the strange connection he felt with her. They spent the next few days in quiet conversation. The Queen, whose name he learned was Seraphis, shared stories of her people, their once glorious empire, and the dark days that had followed the betrayal that shattered everything. Her world, once full of harmony, had turned into a battleground, where the rich and powerful tore apart the foundations of society in a desperate bid for control. The galaxy was divided, the forces of corruption ever growing, and Seraphis had spent her entire life trying to hold her people together, even as their very culture was slowly destroyed by greed and selfishness. But despite the destruction around them, Marcus noticed something in Seraphis' eyes, a flicker of hope. It was faint, like a dying ember struggling against the wind, but it was there. She was not like the others he had fought against. There was kindness in her, a deep, genuine care for the future of her people, and he could see that she was not the monster he had imagined. "Why did they betray you?" Marcus asked one night, as they sat under the stars, the cool breeze carrying the scent of alien flowers through the air. Seraphis' eyes darkened, and for a brief moment, she seemed lost in her memories. "Because they wanted power," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "They wanted to control everything, every world, every star, every soul. They believed that to rule this galaxy, they had to crush those who stood in their way. Even if it meant destroying everything we once stood for." It was a chilling thought. Marcus had heard stories of warlords and tyrants, but hearing them from Seraphis, a queen who had witnessed the devastation firsthand, made it feel even more real. "They thought they could break me," Seraphis continued, her voice now barely above a whisper. "But they underestimated the strength of my people. We may be broken, but we are not finished. And neither are you, Marcus." Marcus met her gaze, feeling the weight of her words. She wasn't speaking just to comfort him. She was speaking with the confidence of someone who had seen the worst of what the universe had to offer and still believed that it could be saved. And in that moment, he realized something: he believed her. The bond between them deepened, not just because of their shared experience of loss and survival, but because they both understood that fighting wasn't enough anymore. They needed to rebuild, to heal, to bring back what had been lost. And for that, they needed each other. As the days passed, Marcus began to train with Seraphis people. The warriors of her empire were unlike any he had ever seen, graceful, swift, and deadly. They had learned to fight not just with strength, but with purpose. Each movement had meaning, each strike had a reason. Marcus was used to the harsh, mechanical training of human soldiers, where every move was calculated and efficient. But with Seraphis warriors, it was different. They fought with heart, with passion, with a deep sense of honor that made him question everything he had ever been taught. One evening, as the stars glittered above them, Seraphis took him aside. "You are not just a soldier, Marcus," she said, her voice steady. "You have something more inside you. You fight not just for survival, but for something greater. I can see it in you. You have the heart of a leader." Marcus looked at her, unsure of what to say. He wasn't a leader. He was just a man trying to survive. But as he looked around at the warriors training beside him, he began to understand. Leadership wasn't about being in charge, it was about inspiring others to stand together, to fight for a common cause. He had never thought of himself that way, but maybe, just maybe, he could be. As the weeks went by, he grew stronger, not just in body, but in spirit. The Queen had given him something he hadn't even realized he was missing, a purpose. And slowly, he began to embrace it. He was no longer just fighting for survival. He was fighting for something bigger, something worth dying for. He was fighting for the future of both their worlds. One evening, as they stood side by side, overlooking the war-torn landscape, Seraphis spoke again, her voice soft but filled with resolve. "We will win this war, Marcus. Not with weapons or bloodshed, but with unity. We must bring together those who are willing to fight for the greater good." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of her words sink deep into his chest. It wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about rebuilding what had been destroyed, about creating something new from the ashes of the old world. And as he looked at her, this alien queen, who had saved him and shown him a new way, he knew one thing for sure. Together, they could do it. They could rebuild the galaxy, piece by piece. And no matter what came next, they wouldn't face it alone. The hidden truth. The days turned into weeks, and with every passing moment, Marcus felt himself drawn deeper into the world of Seraphis and her people. The Queen, once a distant and untouchable figure, had become his ally, his confidant. He trained harder, learned more, and grew stronger with each day. He was no longer just a soldier, he was becoming part of something much bigger, a cause, a future. But there were still questions that gnawed at the back of his mind, questions that he couldn't shake, no matter how much time passed. Why had the Queen saved him? Why had she gone against the orders of her people and risked everything to pull him from the battlefield? He was just a human soldier, and yet, she had treated him as though he were someone important. One night, after a long day of training, Marcus found himself sitting alone in a quiet corner of the castle, his thoughts heavy. He couldn't help but wonder about the truth behind the Queen's decision, the truth about her people's betrayal, and what role he truly played in all of this. As if summoned by his thoughts, Seraphis appeared, her silhouette framed by the light of the moon. She walked over to him slowly, her movements graceful as always, but tonight there was something different in her expression. There was a weight in her eyes, a heaviness that told Marcus she had been carrying something for far too long. She sat beside him, not saying a word at first. The silence between them was comfortable, but it was also filled with an unspoken tension, as if both of them knew something needed to be said but neither was ready to speak it. Finally, it was Seraphis who broke the silence. "There is something I've been meaning to tell you, Marcus," she said softly. Her voice was tinged with a quiet sadness, a note of regret that made his heart tighten in his chest. "Something that I never wanted you to know, something that I had hoped to keep buried." Marcus turned to face her, his heart racing. "What is it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Seraphis took a deep breath, her eyes locking onto his. The war, the betrayal, it wasn't just the ambition of others that tore my empire apart, she began, her voice shaky. It was me. I played a part in it. The words hit Marcus like a shockwave, and for a moment, he couldn't speak. He had always seen Seraphis as a victim of the war, someone who had been thrust into a terrible situation, someone who was doing her best to hold her people together. The thought that she could be responsible for the downfall of her own empire was almost too much to comprehend. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice low with disbelief. Seraphis looked away for a moment, staring out at the horizon as if searching for the right words. "I wasn't always a queen. I was born into a family of scholars, of thinkers. My people believed in knowledge, in wisdom. But I wanted more. I wanted power. I thought that if I could take control, if I could unite the galaxy under one banner, I could bring peace. But instead, I caused chaos." She paused, her voice breaking as she continued. "I made a pact with the wrong people, with those who promised to give me the power to save my empire. They told me that in exchange for my loyalty, they would help me destroy the enemies that threatened our peace. I was naive, Marcus. I didn't see that they were using me as a pawn in their own game." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as the weight of her words sank in. She had been manipulated, just like everyone else. But unlike the others, she had been in a position of power. She had made choices that led to the fall of her empire, to the destruction of everything she had fought for. And now, she was paying the price for those decisions. "I never meant for any of this to happen," Seraphis whispered, her voice filled with regret. "I thought I could control it, but I couldn't. And now I'm trying to fix it, to undo the damage I caused. But I can't do it alone, Marcus. I need you." Her words were a plea, and it struck Marcus to his core. The mighty queen, the ruler of a shattered empire, was asking for his help. He had never imagined a day when someone like her, someone so powerful, would be so vulnerable. "You don't have to do this alone," he said quietly, his hand reaching out to touch hers. "We're in this together now. Whatever happens, we'll face it side by side." Seraphis turned to him, her eyes filled with something new, a spark of hope. It wasn't just a look of gratitude, but something deeper. She had been carrying the weight of her people's downfall for so long, but now, with Marcus by her side, she could finally see a way forward. "You truly believe that, don't you?" she said, her voice soft but filled with a new strength. "You're not just a soldier. You're the hope I've been looking for, the hope my people need. Together, we can rebuild." Marcus nodded, the weight of her words settling in his chest. For the first time, he understood what she meant. This wasn't just about surviving the war. It was about redemption, about restoring what had been lost, about rebuilding what had been destroyed. And it wasn't just Seraphis who had a part to play in this. He did, too. They both did. As they sat together in the quiet of the night, Marcus knew that the road ahead would not be easy. There would be more battles to fight, more sacrifices to make. But he also knew one thing for sure, he wasn't alone anymore. And together, they could change the course of history. A new beginning. The days after their conversation were filled with action and preparation. Marcus and Seraphis had forged an unspoken pact, one that went beyond simple survival. They were now bound by a shared purpose, to rebuild what had been destroyed, to fight for a future neither of them had ever imagined. But as the days passed, the tension in the air grew thicker, and the stakes grew higher. The alien queen had confessed her deepest regret, but Marcus could see that it wasn't just the past that haunted her. It was the weight of the future. Their people were scattered, lost in a sea of war and division, and the forces who had betrayed Seraphis were still out there, waiting for the right moment to strike. "We can't keep hiding in the shadows forever," Marcus said one evening as he stood at the edge of the castle's balcony, staring out at the horizon. The war seemed endless. Ships filled the skies, both alien and human, caught in a never-ending struggle for dominance. The galaxy was teetering on the edge of complete destruction, and yet, no one seemed willing to step forward and make a stand. Seraphis joined him, her presence as steady and unwavering as the stars above them. "You're right," she replied, her voice calm but firm. "But we must be careful. If we move too quickly, we risk everything. My people are fractured, divided. Some still believe in the old ways, while others have lost all hope. We cannot force unity, Marcus. It must come naturally." Marcus turned to face her, his expression serious. "I know. But we can't wait forever, either. There are too many who are suffering, too many who have lost everything. We can't keep playing defense. We need to show them that we are not just survivors, we are fighters. That we are willing to fight for a future, no matter how uncertain it is." Seraphis studied him for a moment, as though weighing his words, before nodding slowly. "I see what you mean. It's not enough to simply survive. We need to inspire them, to give them a reason to believe in something greater than themselves. I've tried to do it on my own, but I can't do it without the people." Marcus could see the internal struggle within her. She had been carrying the weight of an empire's fall for so long, had tried to carry it alone, that the idea of relying on others seemed almost impossible. But she was starting to see, just as he had, that their future didn't rest solely on their shoulders. It rested on the people who still had hope, the ones who believed in the possibility of change. "We start by giving them that hope," Marcus said, a fire igniting within him. "We don't wait for the perfect moment. We make it happen." The Queen looked at him, her eyes softening. "You've become more than just a soldier to me, Marcus. You've become the symbol of what we can be, a new beginning for us all." But as they stood there, talking about the future, a dark shadow loomed on the horizon. The warning signals were everywhere, the rumble of an enemy fleet drawing closer. The forces that had betrayed Seraphis, the ones who wanted to control the galaxy for their own gain, were preparing for their next move. "We don't have much time," Seraphis said, her tone suddenly more urgent. "They are coming. And they will stop at nothing to destroy us." Marcus looked at her, his jaw tightening. "Then we'll be ready. We'll take the fight to them." Seraphis nodded, her expression resolute. "It's time to unite the broken pieces of my empire. It's time to make them see that we are stronger together." The following days were filled with action. The two of them traveled across the galaxy, meeting with warlords, leaders, and citizens from all corners of the empire. It wasn't easy. Some refused to join their cause, unwilling to trust an alien queen who had once led them into ruin. Others had lost everything, family, friends, and hope, and were too afraid to fight again. But there were also those who believed, who saw the potential for a future that didn't involve endless war and destruction. Slowly but surely, Marcus and Seraphis gathered their allies. They formed alliances with the unlikeliest of groups, rogue fleets, rebel factions, and even former enemies, who saw in them the possibility of something greater. And as they gathered their forces, something began to shift. The spark of hope that had been nearly extinguished in the hearts of many began to burn again. People fought not just for survival, but for a future. A future they could build together. Seraphis and Marcus stood together on the bridge of her flagship, watching as the fleet they had gathered prepared for battle. The weight of what they were about to face was enormous. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and the enemy fleet was closing in. But for the first time, neither of them felt afraid. "Do you believe we can win this?" Marcus asked, his voice steady, despite the tension in the air. Seraphis turned to him, her gaze full of determination. "I believe in us. In you, Marcus. I believe that together, we can change the course of history." As the enemy fleet loomed on the horizon, Marcus felt a surge of confidence. This wasn't just about fighting for survival anymore. It was about fighting for something that mattered, for a new beginning, for a chance to rebuild what had been lost. The battle was upon them, but this time, they weren't fighting alone. They were fighting for the future, for the chance to rebuild an empire shattered by betrayal. Together, they would stand. Together, they would fight. And together, they would win.